Welcome to Envision More. Here, we dig deep into the insights of first-generation wealth builders, unearthing stories of passion, resilience, and relentless vision. Your host is Wayne Wagner Jr., founder of Visionary Wealth Management. So sit back and dig in. It's time to envision more.
Hey, this is Wayne Wagner from Visionary Wealth Management. Today, we are here at the Envision More podcast, and this is going to be a fun time. I've got my regular co-host, Trent Booth, president of Veritas Leadership Group, with us. And also joining us today is my lovely wife, May, beautiful daughter, CJ, and amazing son, Bryce. So this is kind of the Wagner family shtick today, and we're going to go deep into some stuff. And this is we're using this podcast to kind of mark our collective thoughts on our own journey. And hopefully we'll be able to share some nuggets that will help you accelerate on your journey and how you're thinking as a listener. So Trent's going to kind of lead us off and keep us going and kind of stop me from cannibalizing all the time. So thanks, Trent, for being here. And thank you, everybody else, for making the time.
Wayne, thanks for having me for this, especially this episode, because I love spending time with this family and hearing the stories where we've been in the past. We've decided as a group, and there's like a whole 27-minute run-up to our starting here. So there's a lot. We're in good form right now. We've decided we're going to start right off with a brief intro, kind of who you are, age, what you're up to right now, and just capturing where we're at in February 2024, which is when we're capturing this. This will probably air much later. Why don't we start with, let's go youngest to oldest. And so we'll start with Bryce. Bryce, give us a bit of envision more what it means to you after you tell us a little bit about where you're at right now.
Well, right now I am a recruiter for 96 Shades. We do corporate gifting and fundraisers, and we're getting different influencers to rep our company, stuff like that. We're basically just a luxury sunglasses company that has a bunch of different brands, and we're really getting started. We took over that business a summer or two ago, and they had no online presence. So for the past 4 to 6 months, we've been building an online interface and making it as profitable as possible.
And as you're answering questions, people aren't going to assume your age. They're going to probably peg you higher. How old are you right now, Bryce?
I'm 19.
At recording, 19 years old. And what does envision more mean to you?
Right. So when I think of envision more, I think of it more so as a way of networking. I find that especially with the Wagner lifestyle, we have so many different ways of life and different circles that communicate with each other. And I think that envisioning more is really just another way of saying, how do we get these circles to best communicate with each other?
Excellent. I'll look forward to hearing more. We'll come back to you. Sierra, also known as CJ, and I might just, full disclosure, just refer to you as CJ today if I forget Sierra. I'll try to read Sierra and refer to you as Sierra today because it's also beautiful. CJ, where are you at right now in life? What's going on?
So first of all, I'm 22. My life has been kind of crazy. I graduated college back in 2022. Went through in about 3 years with my bachelor, came out with my bachelor's of business. I went full steam ahead right into real estate, got my real estate license for New Jersey. And then most recently in 2023, got it for Delaware also. As of now, I'm kind of taking a step back and moving back into the office at Visionary Wealth Management. Right now, I'm the executive coordinator, taking over all correspondence in the front office. If you call, you'll probably hear my lovely voice. So say hey if you call. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. Looking forward, I am studying for my Series 65 to possibly step underneath of Dad and become a junior advisor one day.
And Series 65 would be required for that. Now, we need to note here, I think everybody that's listening to this went through 2020, 21, and 22 when you were finishing college in 3 years, which is no small feat, right? Getting a degree in 3 during pandemic as well, I'm going to note here, which is just, I have many good friends and family members that did not finish college during that season because that was not easy. But love the track that you're on right now. Tell me a little bit about what envision more means for you.
So envision more means to me, which it kind of piggybacks off of what Bryce said. Like that was a really good point in like what pulling all of our worlds together and saying, okay, how can this be more? But also kind of pulling into our religious aspect. We are Christians and we are looking to do whatever we can to grow the kingdom. We don't like using the word kingdom anymore, but grow the kingdom, grow people, and reach out to those around us. So envisioning more is how can we use and utilize our privilege in an aspect of where we are today and who we are and the hardships that we've grown to call everyone else around us to envision more of what they could be.
So we're coming to May in a moment. Briefly, though, tell me about your experience with Bushels of Blessing, because you've been involved with that organization for years now.
I don't
And
even know.
it seems significant. If we're talking hours, it's not like you throw an hour a week in there. So how many years have you been with Bushels?
I'm gonna say probably 13 now because I'm 22. So I started when I was 9.
Yeah.
I started basically a full-time job when I turned 9.5.
Yeah.
I was almost 10. And I was out with them 40 plus hours a week, going around to our local farms and gleaning what they would call seconds, things that they would basically just throw right back out into the fields that are perfectly healthy. There's no reason why you can't eat them except maybe that like the cucumber looks like a smiley face. And like there's no reason you can't eat them. So with bushels, we would glean those and then take them back and distribute them to food banks and pantries in our area to help provide a nutrient dense meal to those in need around us.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Okay, May. Hi, May.
Hey.
How you doing, bud? Tell us about where you're at. February 24. What's going on for May Wagner?
So as you know, we were part of a Christian school for 13 years. So for those maybe 8 or 9 of those years, I served as the director of advancement for them, which was very busy and sometimes 60 to 70 hours a week. And then when COVID hit, everything kind of came to a stop. The school closed down, and I spent some time sharing my feelings with the counselor. And then after that, I've kind of re-entered with just doing event planning for different organizations that we support, and also a real estate professional. We have some properties that we manage, and so that's first and foremost my responsibility. And then also being a mom and a wife, which is huge. So, and I take care of my mother that lives with us. She's going to be 90 this year. And whatever else may come up, basically I'm the person that has the ability to take on things as they come up because everybody else has got full plates. So.
That old adage, you want something done, you give it to a busy person. May's the busy person. She's the one that picks it up and runs with it. And it's done very, very well. Envision more, May. What does that mean to you?
Well, envisioning more is what gets me out of bed in the morning. It keeps me from being in a place of complacency, forces me never to be content where I am. But I think that one of the things that really speaks to me from the goals and that we've set is that being able to impact others, whether that be through supporting organizations that we come alongside, or if that's investing into relationships, helping other young men and women start businesses and become financially stable. So envisioning more is just, it's basically, it keeps us always thinking about what can we do better? What can we do more of? How can we impact, other people? So
Wayne, hearing your favorite people in the world, sharing a little bit about what Envision More means and where they're at in life right now. Life's pretty good if you're Wayne Wagner Jr.
Life is really, really good, and
Yeah.
I could not be more proud of this family, of this group of people, of how we are working on the future together, thinking multi-generationally, operating multi-generationally, and envisioning more together. So, um,
I have a question here that really revolves around one of the, I would say, the mantras that's pretty famous, not quite world known yet, but Wagners do big things. So if
hmm.
I say Wagners do big things, I'm curious, especially from the kids, when your first memory of that was. And I know May's got a story, so what we'll go to the kids in a moment. But May, where does this come from? Wagners do big things. Is there an origin story for that?
We know when Wayne and I started reading a bunch of books as kind of like parlayed out of my Herbalife years, we learned that language is important. The way that you present things to try to garner support or buy-in in your idea. So we would, from very young ages, tell our kids, Wagners do big things. We're going to go do this thing. And I remember there was a time where we were neck deep in at the school, and our kids were tired. I think we were all tired. And I believe it was a children's resale event that we were going to run. And we would run these big events, and it would be an all weekend thing. And it's very laborsome, and, we'd be very tired, and we'd just be drained at the end of it. And our kids were standing in our living room, or I guess it was our dining room at the front of the house at the time. We're getting ready to go. And the kids are just like, oh, we got to go do another one. And I remember Dad turning around and saying to both of you guys, yes, because Wagners do big things, and we're going to go do this thing. And it was like at the ages of like 7 and 10, my kids were like, you're right, because we're Wagners, so we're going to go do it. Let's go do it. And so even to this day, when Wayne, sits on a stage in front of, 400 people and says, Wagners do big things, that's what I think of, is that kind of living room moment. It's like that just kind of spurs us on to keep going. So,
CJ, let's go to you for a second. If we say Wagners do big things, can you think of a time where you're like, I didn't want to do it, and then I was like, Wagners do big things? Identity drives behavior, right? So if we identify as, hey, I'm a Wagner, and therefore I do big things, can you give us a moment in the history, in your past, where this really resonated for you?
I definitely have to say a lot through college. Going into college, I didn't know anybody. I went to a college that was 14 and a half hours away from home. And I knew no one. I knew the 2 roommates that I was moving in with, but that was only because I met them on Instagram once. And now I was moving into a room with them. And so through that first semester of college, I got really into a dark place where it really was just hard getting out of bed. But instead of allowing myself to dwell in that and sit there and be like, I'm not going to class, I'm not doing anything, I first of all envisioned more, that I was going to do more in my life if I just did it. So I had to remind myself, like, yeah, I'm a Wagner. We do big things. Let's go get it. So I would get up each morning. We do big things. I'm going to class. This may be a small thing, but in the end, it's a big thing.
Just doing the activity and believing that if I repeat this over and over again, I'll get better than what we're experiencing right now. What's interesting in both these stories so far, it's not like Wagners don't question whether they want to do big things. Okay? But what's important here is it's not about like how it started. Like, I'm feeling defeated, or I'm feeling tired, or I don't want to. We do it anyway. And this is really one of the things we talk about in leadership development, is that ability to overcome that inertia, to overcome that first step and all the anxiety that hits us before that first, doing it anyway, stepping forward, even when I don't feel like it. I would celebrate that as a discipline at Wagners do big things. Fascinating. All right, Bryce, coming to you. Wagners do big things. When is that really resonated truest for you?
I mean, when it resonated truest for me was, if I'm being 100% genuine, when I was in like 7th grade, I was getting picked on by a kid for 5-6 years, and my dad was like, look, he's laid his hands on you multiple times now, like if you want to end it, you got to do it. And I was like, I'm a short little 300-pound kid that can run as fast as he can throw his hands. So it was definitely a really intimidating thing for me, and let alone one day on the playground, and all I saw in my head was Wagners do big things. And I really think that it's not so much like a mantra or something like that for us. It really is a lifestyle. It's really like, it's a reminder for us to like notice our surroundings, notice what the bigger plan is, and then notice that this is just a step.
So if there's an opportunity to act or not act, because I'm a Wagner, I'm taking a shot, regardless of how I feel, regardless of possible outcome. I'm just going to believe that this could be bigger. How about for you, May? If we think about just obviously the origins of it, but when this has hit you too, because it's one of those things where we're saying it to our kids. Now we got to do it. Has there been a time or a story you can think of where you're like, no, Wagners do big things. This is a hard moment, but I'm going to push through and do it anyway?
Well, I think one of the hardest times of my life was watching my dad waste away with dementia. And we had brought my mom and my dad both to live with us because my mom's health was being affected. She ended up in the hospital for a week, at which point my dad ended up living with me during that time. And it was at that time that I was like, Mom cannot do this alone. And we were right in the middle. It was 2014. We were right in the middle of everything we were doing with the school. And I might get a little emotional. And just feeling that burden of, how can I do this too? You know, how can I take my mom and dad in and nurse my mom back to health and care for my dad, who has the brain of like a 2-year-old right now? And we did it all together. You know, and it was a big thing. And I will tell you that when my dad finally, you know, took his last breath, I had no regret. You know, I could have put my dad in a nursing home, and then I probably would have had a ton of regret about how I didn't spend the last, you know, 2 years of his life with him and just let him, you know, waste away in a facility. And instead, I walked away, you know, feeling that I did all that I could. And that was a really big thing.
Yeah,
that we did. So
that would be sacrificial big love, stepping up and helping dad finish well, helping mom finish well, and being there right to the end. Wagners do big things. All right, Wayne, coming to you now. Take a breath.
Yeah.
So you're hearing about Wagners do big things. And these are very intimate stories. These aren't, we're buying a business. This isn't we're rescuing the school, although these are true stories too.
Yeah.
For you, Wagners do big things. Can you think of a time there where that's hit for you, or, you know, you've got that moment of decision where like the family looks at you like, all right, Dad, what do we do? And you're like, Wagners do big things. And you had to tell yourself that.
Well, I think so. There's 100 stories flood my mind, so we could be here all day. We won't be, but I think that the challenge is watching each member of this family take on their own demons. You know, CJ talking about her dark days early in college, Bryce moving from, he said, a little 7th grader at 300 pounds. A 300-pound 7th grader isn't a little guy. But Bryce transformed himself in the years to come. And so, but I think that this idea of doing big things together, I mean, we set some big goals, and we said like, hey, Wagners are we do big things. We're going to fish in all 50 states. Now we've made it to 30, and then, you know, the kids got old enough and started taking jobs in some of the businesses, and they decided they wanted to go work on the Ocean City, New Jersey boardwalk for 60 hours a week instead of travel to Montana to go fishing for 4 weeks during the summer. And so, but that was a choice they made. And so, you know, we still have 20 states to go. but COVID killed Alaska on us. So
I was going to say Sierra was like, she's putting in 20 hours a week at bushels. It's hard to just go to Alaska and do some fishing, although it still remains on the bucket list. It's still on the dreams list.
Yes, it is still absolutely on the list.
We may have to restart that list because we're adding someone to the family, though. So
fun.
Yep.
Who also loves to fish.
Yeah, right.
When we put that on the back burner, I kind of said to Dad, it's like, it doesn't mean that we're not going to accomplish that goal. It just means that we might not accomplish it until we have grandkids, right?
This is fun.
Trent, I think the biggest piece of Envision More for May and I, there's so many pieces of our journey where we've stepped out, stepped up, Envision More together. I think that the most crucial conversations that we have had have been with our kids in the area of our relationship with them and their relationship with us. And so from very early on, a very young age, we were telling our kids, hey, listen, social media is built to drag you kicking and screaming away from mom and dad. So by the time you are in your formative years, you're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, your friends and media is telling you that your parents are idiots. They have nothing to contribute to your life. Their IQ is like half of the average person. They don't really care about you. And so May and I spent a lot of time early on and still preach that to our kids every day. We love you. We care about you. We want to take our failures and our lessons and the resources that we've built, the relationships that we've built, and we want to accelerate you through your teens and 20s. It doesn't mean you're not going to have to work. This is not the Lucky Sperm Club. We're not running you're our kids, and so you get some kind of blessing for doing that. You still got to be the hardest working one in the room. You still got to be becoming the maximum of who you can become. But we want to, stay tethered to you and envision more together and build more together, because the long-term compounding effects of that are massive. And we see so many people that live with a mindset of, every generation has to make their own mistakes. Every generation has to learn all their lessons. And it really what it does is it bears out the biblical concept of the sins of the father being visited upon the children of the second and third generation. That's an Old Testament statement. But the reason for that is that the father doesn't teach the lessons to the second and third generation. And so the second and third generation repeat the mistakes. And so, and there's look, we all have trauma. We all have things that we've had to overcome. We all have, areas of our personalities that may be addictive in nature or things like that. But the more that we can capture that, and if there's one thing May and I have done, look, we didn't write the book on this. We didn't have a book, a manual to follow. We are still stumbling and fumbling through this on our own. We're finding resources today that, good Lord, we wish we had 15 years ago. But one thing that I think May and I envisioned more for was having a great working, functional, growth-minded relationship with our kids at this season in life. And so, and part of that was built around me going out, May going out, and just tearing it up. We spent our 20s freaking grinding. 60, 70, 80-hour weeks were a regular thing, 5, 6, 7 days a week working, just grinding and learning and growing and becoming. Because, and even when May was home raising the kids, I was still doing the 70, 80 hours a week out running the business. And then we took over the school and we're both eyeball deep in that. But we were, I've told May that, for the last 4 or 5 years here, like, this is the time of my life that I have been living for and dreaming about and envisioning, because this is a time in my life where our kids, they're reading the same stuff we are. We're communicating in the same language. We've got the same vocabulary. We're sharing and articulating our values together. And together we are accelerating in every area of life. Not without speed bumps, not without mistakes, but all of us are accelerating, and we're accelerating together. And that, to me, is like I could break down and cry at any moment, because this is the moment I have been living for like 25 years. Since before these kids were born, I have been living for this right here. And I'm humbled, I'm grateful, and I'm proud to be part of this.
So we're just now catching into this season where we've got Chris and Melissa Smith, and they've got Family Brand, and they're bringing, I guess, a little more curriculum to what I think you've already been doing. It's one of those things where, like, hey, that's more organized than what we've been doing. We've been doing this without a plan, but we've been intentionally and strategically meeting as a family to craft what we're all about, to identify what our core values are, to make sure that we're living those and living those well. Lots of conversations about the future, not just individually, but also together. So I just want to dwell a little bit on this because I can't name another family that's been doing this as intensely, as intentionally, or as consistently and as long as this family has. And that said, is I know that there are moments, because I know when I used to say to our family, hey, when we do things we don't want to do, we increase our, and the kids would say, capacity. That was our, Wagner do big things. When we do things we don't want to do, we increase our capacity. And the kids didn't always love this. They didn't always love being dragged to the table to talk about the future, or they're like, it feels a little extra dad, those type of things. If we come back to the kids and we go, all right, when's your earliest memory of thinking about the future and crafting our core values and talking about what it means to be a Wagner? Bryce, why don't we come to you first here? You can pass to CJ if you're still thinking.
My earliest memories of us kind of forming our identity as a family. I mean, I feel like it was something more so where we didn't really like. I think Family Brand, the reason why it worked so well, or I guess it kind of went well with us, was because we were already doing a lot of these things on the daily, 5-10 minutes a day, rather than sitting down for an hour or two once a week. So I was finding, like, as we were watching Family Brand and stuff like that, I was finding like, oh, like I could point out to different situations for each thing that they're teaching, but there was never really a time where we sat down and was like, hey, here's our family name. This is what this means, and this is who we are. But there was always a like unsaid understanding of that. And there was always like a level to mentally uphold, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's like we were doing the work even if we didn't have the textbook. Like you were doing it already, and now that you got the textbook, you're like, oh, this is better. But also, we've been doing it. We can kind of graft into it.
If I can jump in there for a second, I think one of the big things Family Brand has done is helped us come up with cohesive vocabulary, right? So we talk about these things, we have these one-offs, but Family Brand has helped us have a discussion about kind of the larger context. And I think it's also given us a bit more opportunity to talk through kind of like what that means in terms of accountability. So, if I'm not showing up the way we've said that Wagners are supposed to show up, somebody can come to me and they don't have to say, what's the matter with you, Dad? It doesn't have to be a defensive or accusatory. It's just, hey, Dad, Wagners show up for one another. And I asked you to be at this event and you're giving me 13 reasons why you can't. I just want to call you to our common shared values. And so we had the conversation, we articulated it, we put a pin, we said, this is who we are, how we want to show up for one another. And you're right. I need to cancel that client meeting. So
we've made agreements as a family together. And this is one of the things I'm loving about, again, Family Brand, is we might have talked about those things. It became crystallized because we had a bit of a more of a direction there. And we can make an agreement then that's easy to remind somebody, hey, we have an agreement here, bud. Hey, client meetings are important. So is my show. Right. So CJ, if we go to you for a second, earliest memories of kind of, because if you hung out with your friends, they're like, yeah, we don't talk about, Smiths do big things, not picking on the Smiths. First name coming to mind, but this is not what happens in other families. This is something that we do, though. When can you think of a time when you recognize that?
Well, so I'm getting married in October. That's been a big topic between me and my fiance. With us, we have this goal. We're envisioning more. We're being called to do and to be someone who we are needed to be. And with my fiance and his family, that's not something that they easily and readily talk about. So when it comes to the family brand, like specifically with Chris and Melissa's program, we've been able to sit down and work through it as a family of 4, but also bring my fiance into this process. And so Bryce and I may be sitting here saying, yeah, we've done this for our entire life, from as far back as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
But as my fiance is sitting in and listening, he's going, this is really good stuff.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it like this. I've never even once passed through my mind that this is how a family can function. And it's come a long way. Definitely from when it first started as we're Wagners, we do big things. Now it's a very, very much more detailed of we're Wagners, we do this. We're Wagners, we do this. We're Wagners. And so probably my first and earliest memory of our family brand, quote unquote, would be when we were heavily in the school and doing those resales. Those resales were hard work. Like, it was hard. And we're Wagners. We're the hardest working people in the rooms. And we live up to that, and we want to live up to that. We walk into a room. Yeah, we may be planning the event, but we're sitting there getting our hands dirty too. So
those listening may recall the scripture that Wayne called out earlier, which is, hey, sins of the father typically are meant to be repeated. There's another part of that scripture, though, which is like, hey, those who are faithful for 1,000 generations get to reap the fruit of that benefit, right? So what's interesting is that as you're starting this new journey in October, very excited for this, and you and Jacob become one, there's a new last name. What's that new last name?
Jardum.
So Jardums do big things. I believe will be a thing. So part of it has been, yes, the Wagner brand. Also, that brand continues down the line. In fact, I would dare to argue that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and this started well before, right? And maybe not as intentional as this iteration of Wagner family, but we are benefiting from parents, grandparents, and maybe even great grandparents that started something pretty great here. May, can you speak to that a little bit, even if it wasn't as articulated or as intentional as you all have been? Were there kind of moments like this growing up for you where you're like, hey, we do different things? And I can't recall your maiden name, but there's a tradition that you've benefited from as well.
It's sad. I really can't remember there being this unification of thought and theme in our family. My dad was a pastor, and we were just trying to be good PKs. Living in the fishbowl. And our theme was definitely faith. Our theme was about faith.
And for the uninitiated, PKs, pastors' kids.
Yes, pastors' kids.
Well, and your dad did some things that were, I mean, he was more entrepreneurial than most pastors I've ever interacted with.
That is true. I did learn how to run a business from my dad. Because he was very resourceful. He had to be. He wasn't making a lot of money as a pastor, and he had 5 kids. And we always had all of our needs met. My dad paid for me to go to Christian school, and ran a mechanics shop called the Muffler Mart for 16 years or so, and taught my 2 brothers how to be mechanics. That served them well. They actually went out into the field and in different areas doing the same thing. So, but that was, I never felt like there was this, hey, this is what we're going to do. Yeah. It was all my dad was just constantly trying to push the wheel forward, and he kept us busy, right? Put me in the shop, running the front of the store at the age of 14. I was giving out estimates on brake jobs and muffler replacements and exhaust systems and stuff like that. So I learned a lot. And I watched my dad run a business with like not much business background. And then he got into real estate, and he had at one time, I think he had 10 apartment rentals that he was running. And then it was, if someone moved out, we showed up with our paint buckets and our
turnover. Sure.
To turn it all over, because we did all the work ourselves. And so I learned how to do a lot of handy things, watching my dad do it for little money. Right. So we try to do it with the least amount of money spent. So, so that part, was good. Right. So that I guess you could say my dad envisioned more. He didn't just settle for what the pastor's salary was going to be at the church. He was like, no, I can do better. I have more bandwidth than this, and I can envision more for my family. And he did a really good job with that. I'm very appreciative.
He was also really mission minded, where even when he transitioned out of full-time pastorate, he was dragging you guys all over South America doing missions work and doing mission trips and that kind of stuff. So they preach in third world countries.
Right.
So it was using the entrepreneurial earning in the U.S. to be able to go do stuff on a foreign field. So it was that kind of, and that really is the ebb and the flow. We talk a lot about calling versus stewardship, where we all have stewardship. We all are to be becoming the best version of ourselves, or at least a better version of ourselves than we were yesterday. We won't achieve perfection. We'll never get there this side of eternity, but trees don't grow half as tall as they can, and neither should we. So we're all called, we all have a innate God-given calling to be stewards of where we are. Some of us have a sacred calling to service, to active daily full-time service, whether that's in the context of faith, or whether that's in the context of running a food pantry, or whether it's in the context of serving those with addictions, or basically serving those who can't return the favor, right? And that's we call that a sacred calling as opposed to stewardship. But to the extent that I think your dad was a guy who did a good job with those two pistons in his life, kind of working back and forth, that used the entrepreneurship, used the stewardship to generate the revenue to go do the mission stuff and the calling. And so, we're having that kind of conversation and those kind of relationships with organizations today, like Bushels, like Foster the Family, other organizations like that, to say, hey, we don't have the daily calling, but we were pretty good at this stewardship thing, at this revenue generation thing. So we're going to do this, and we want to partner with you to do the other. And so we'll steward, you call, we'll steward, you call. And that's what, and when we can, and that really is, when we start thinking about that, and then the compound growth over time, compound growth is this idea that, hey, let's say you put $1,000 in your retirement plan today, but you're 20 years old. And so by the time you're 65, that money is going to double, I don't know, maybe 6 times. So 1,000 becomes 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16,000, 32,000, $64,000. So 64x multiple for money that you put away. But the key determining factor of that outcome is time.
Started early. Yep.
Yeah, start early, and it's the multiplication over time. And so when we talk about values acceleration, envisioning more, thinking multi-generationally, it's not because there's something magic in us that's compounding this. It's trying to take these values and the resources and multiply them and echo them over 2 or 3 generations instead of 1 lifetime. Right. And so, because when we can do that, the impact is exponentially more. Right. You think about what I just said was 6 times. I mean, you get 6 multiplications, you get 64 times. But if you only get 5, you only get 32 times.
Sure.
Right. That last one is 50% of the total in the last multiplication. So if we can take those same compounding concepts and talk about entrepreneurship and stewardship versus calling and that kind of stuff, and put it multi-generationally, we get the buy-in from the next generation to keep up those pistons moving, and we get compounding that we just I can't possibly get in 1 generation. Right.
So we're getting towards the end of our time. I want to go back for a moment here and give you a chance to speak to this. The old proverb goes something to the effect of, I hear and I wonder, I see and I understand. And I hear you saying that I witnessed my dad, industrious, entrepreneurial,
Mhm.
working hard, and demonstrating his values. And I would argue actually as well that you've done a great job of not just talking about these values, living them out and giving the kids a chance to see what sacrificial giving, what organizing a resale so that people can buy uniforms at half price or less, right, to be able to go to that school. It was worth it. It was a good investment of time, despite the outlay and what it cost us. It was also worth it, and you learned that at a young age in your family as well. Looked like you had a thought there.
Yeah, I did. And it was about, when we say Wagners do big things, I think when our kids were in junior high and high school, it was also very dangerous to think about the fact that we could be intentional with leading our kids down this road of Wagners do big things. But if we don't have buy-in,
Yeah.
it can actually really backfire on us, because we spent a lot of time, a lot of weekends, and I know for a fact there were times where our kids resented it.
Sure.
And so without getting buy-in and being intentional with our language that, hey, we're a team, we cannot do this without you. This isn't mom and dad trying to push the ball up the hill. This is us. We're working on this together. We need you there with us, and trying to always include them. And one of Wayne and I's biggest fear was that they would see all this time and energy that we'd be putting into ministry.
Sure.
And that they would be totally turned off by ministry in the future, because of the time that it took, of the feelings that were trampled on, of the hopes that were dashed, and I'm not saying that it was all that, but it's hard not to remember the things that really impacted you along the way. And some of the things that really impacted our kids were not positive.
Sure.
And so that's the big fear of saying that Wagners do big things and then trying to go out and create this and do these big things that we're doing. Like, if we're not getting buy-in from these two, then we are losing our family. And so I'm just very grateful that our kids, even through the hard times, were able to see past it, get over it, pick their head up, be like, you're right. I want to be on this train with you and dad. And so I'm so grateful for that.
Doing big things means that our kids might be put in kind of harm's way because we are doing big things. I think about even, this past fall, we're out there on a lake and we're trying to get up on a like a water, like a ski. What is that? Like
water skis.
Water skis. We're trying to get up.
Yeah.
Well, you can wipe out and get really hurt. You could also get up and have the greatest day of your life, but both are part of doing the big things. Is we're going to try, we're going to go for it, knowing sometimes we're going to scrape the knees up or get punched in the face, and other times we're going to enjoy it, but you can't have one without the other. So I hear your mom's heart there, May, in terms of like, all right, we want to find that balance of doing hard things, doing big things, while also knowing that that's going to expose them to risk and to heartache and to failure or to misses or mistreatment. If we think about being in ministry and taking some arrows, friendly fire, if you will, and certainly been in that place as well. But it also sounds like the overall was still worth it, but helping them reframe that as we're going is absolutely essential, because as much as Wagners do big things, I'm grateful that that's for good, because doing big things could go the other way too. I've said to Bryce, as we've been on some of these retreats together, I'm like, good thing you're using your powers for good, because they could go the other way too. You could be the greatest villain of all time if you do big things, and it isn't for helping people, if it isn't for nudging this family forward or our community forward or a school forward, etc. So with moments remaining here, let's talk a little bit about where we're at now. So family brand has become a thing. You guys just are back from Sedona. I think you spent some time kind of hiking in the wilderness and talking about the future. So CJ, why don't we go to you? Well, then we'll hit Bryce and May, and then kind of give Wayne the final word. What was that experience like for you guys? Tell us a little bit about what was going on in the desert.
So we were out in Scottsdale, Arizona, and then spent a day or so in Sedona, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours away from Scottsdale. We were out there hanging out with our partner Triad. for the back end of the week, but we were able to tail on the front and just spend some time together as a family. So every year we try to take about 3 to 4 days and just the four of us get out, get away from home, and just kind of regroup with each other. And we call this our goal planning session for the year. And in those sessions, we sit there and we talk about, okay, in the next year, what do you want your, like, in 1 year from now, what do you want your life to look like? Okay, how about 3 years? What about 5 years? So we talk about the 1-3-5 a lot, but then we kind of added on this year. We haven't done this as a family, like as a family. We added on, who are your top 5 relationships that you want to pour into this year inside the family? And then what are the top 5 relationships outside of the family that you want to pour into? So that kind of gave me specifically like a, hey, like, yeah, we're the Wagners, but we can't do this all by ourselves. It takes a village. And if we're not continuously pouring into the relationships around us, we won't be able to succeed, and we won't be able to fulfill that Envision more that we're all striving for. I was talking with my coach this past week, and we talked about how we don't use the term, hey, I want your advice on something. We use the term, I want your counsel on something, because advice can be given to anybody. You can give anyone advice. But when you actually have a seat on the council, it makes you think, this isn't just a one-man team. This is a team of multiple people in order for us to do the things that we want to do and do big things.
I love that your coach Courtney is one of the few people I know that started coaching at 22 years old, and the only younger person I've ever heard of getting formally coached is now Bryce at 19. But for you guys to get that early, and not just like, hey, we're intentional, we're talking, like, we're working with a coach to become consciously aware on a regular basis to help that 1-3-5 become reality. And the fact that the family's investing into that to help nudge you forward, but also hold each other accountable. I love what you're saying there too about counsel versus advice. I'm actually looking for you to speak into my life. And the result of that, by the way, when you talk about investing into those relationships, wealth acceleration, yes, financially. Also, what kind of relational wealth are we accelerating when we're intentionally building into those closest to us and around us? Wow, big things coming up for CJ. All right, hey Bryce, coming to you. What's emerging for you coming out of that time, that 3 to 4 day window where we're getting strategic, we're planning for our future and dreaming? My understanding was that like 15 hours of actual like real work over a couple days there. That's not a short couple days. That's like nose to the grindstone jam. And what's emerging for you coming out of that, Bryce?
Yeah, so when we were talking about Envision more earlier, I talked about connecting our circles. If we're being real, the only really good way to do that is to go through and, well, talk about your circles. So we really spent time making sure that we were, quite frankly, using all of our resources to the best possible outcome. Let it be if Dave Burris, CJ's, whoever's over the top of CJ,
Real
has
estate mentor.
Real estate guy, yeah.
if
Yep.
I have a use for him, I have every right to go and ask CJ if I could get a connection through him.
Tremendous mentor, and a guy that would return your call, by the way, Dave
absolutely.
Burris. Great shout out, Bryce. Nice.
I used him because he's the greatest. Come on. But
Yeah, he's legit.
It's just really making sure that we're utilizing it to like the maximum potential. And I think at the end of the day, we end up doing a pretty good job with that. And from those sessions every year are normally ideas that carry out for years to come.
Can you give me an example of something you've taken action on since that trip that you're like, okay, this is one, Dave Burris is one. Is there another example of like, all right, I'm going to go deeper with this mentor, somebody that's a little further up the road from me, a buddy? What's something you've taken action on so far?
Out of that trip would be, it would be taking action on different front with shades. I think that after that conversation, I had a better understanding as to how to best effectively do corporate gifting. Going into that, there was definitely some, well, to be very real, I've never done a sales job before, so I was just getting my teeth kicked down my throat every day up to that point.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was hopping on a call, ending the call with, we started the call with, you wanted to like buy from me, and we ended the call with, you didn't want to buy from me. So it was like learning, and
Sure.
the hardest way. And
Yeah.
I think that until I had a moment to really like sit down and be like, hey, not only can you reflect on this, until you reflect on it, it will not change.
Yeah.
And like, I could reflect on with everybody, but with anybody, but nobody's going to know me and the way I react and the way I can talk like my family. There's a very real thing that your family knows you better than anybody else, so they're going to give you different advice than everybody else.
I celebrate this about you and CJ, by the way, the idea that I've asked people for years, it's not what you're getting from this job or from this role, it's who I'm becoming. And if future me is better as a result here, that's a good investment, right? So part of it's not just like, what am I getting paid today? Who am I becoming as a result of this? And as I add more value and I add another piece, and I'm saying this because both of you are taking, I would say, a non-traditional route in terms of how you're establishing your early career. Your dad and I talk a lot about, hey, there's an opportunity to get punched in the face, but it's kind of on rails. So it'll be hard, but it won't be crushing. So we might be bent but not broken, bruised but not shattered, kind of at the end of that season. And I say it because, Bryce, you're in a role that's not only a sales role, which anybody on listening to this been in a sales space. Oh, I learned more about myself in my first week of sales than I did my entire post-secondary career. Like everything I did in college compared to like hearing no on a sales call several times my first couple of weeks, you learn a lot about yourself and how you deal with rejection, etc. So Bryce, in your case, it's not only are you in a sales role, you're also in a like unpaid internship, which I would say more is sweat equity and an opportunity for you to sit at the feet of, let's say, a Justice Voles for a season here, where it's not just the sales piece, you're also understanding how to operate a startup.
Right. And I think that is like, I think that kind of lightens the blow of getting a couple of no's starting off, just because mentally I'm here to learn, and this is the price I need to pay in order to learn from my mentor. So it's kind of like, yes, I get commissions on everything. No, I'm not getting paid hourly. But also when you're just getting started, the commissions are, you might as well not be getting commissions.
Yep. Been there. Future me.
Right.
Good for you.
Right.
So May, you're watching these two.
Oh my goodness.
Thriving. I would suggest doing great. How does that make you feel, Mom?
Wow. It's like, I just want to take a minute, let it soak all in, because I'm so proud. So proud of these two. They say it's not about the journey, it's about who you take with you. And I'm just so proud of these two being on our journey. So
I like who they hang out with, even. Quality of relationships around them. You can see the work that you've invested here, May, is paying off. Future you, right? So you're grinding at that resale, like, all right, I'm making my kids not just like sit and watch it. They're working. They're working with you. And look how they turn out.
By the grace of God, I think.
How about it?
So as far as what came out of my goal setting, so this is a busy year for us, right? We have a child getting married and buying a house and redoing a house, remodeling a house. And so before we met in January as a family, before we made all our goals, but we hadn't shared them yet, I said, so Wayne, what's your number one goal for this year? And he said, wow, I really think it focuses around launching my kids, and especially launching CJ and Jacob. And this is their year. And I said, that's the number one goal for me too. And I feel kind of guilty about it, because it's not a goal that's going to require a lot of hard work. it's more of a goal that is like, yes, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be working, but it's going to be full of like personal reward for me, right? To watch it all unfold. So
Yeah,
We're
because
gonna
you
we're
don't
gonna
have to pick my shoes in the middle of the floor anymore.
What'd you say?
Yeah, because you don't have to pick up my shoes in the middle of the floor.
we're gonna play this back when you're 9 hours into helping paint the house.
I know, right? Or this Saturday when you're helping us take all the drywall out of the basement.
Right, but it's going to have a happy ending as far as
Right.
like there's going to be all this reward at the end to see it,
Yeah.
see you guys happy together, married in a beautiful house. So
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to
I've
it.
noticed that many families spend a lot of time planning the wedding
Yeah.
much more than they plan the marriage. And what I love about this family is that the wedding is going to be great, and I'm really excited. Wagners do big things, and
Mhm.
those that hang around on the periphery get to
It's
benefit
going
from
to be
that.
the biggest thing we've done.
That said, I also celebrate the fact that it's not just about the wedding. We talk much more about launching this marriage into like fertile soil and launch it on a great trajectory for the future. Yeah, you guys spend much more time,
Mhm.
talking about celebrating CJ and Jacob getting rolling and launching. I love that term, launching them well, much more than the wedding itself, which is very different, countercultural, because Wagners do big things. Last word, May, for you?
I don't know. I'm not good at last words, but
Then here comes the most awesome last word. That's how you do it, May. I've seen you.
I don't know if I have an awesome
Undersell, over deliver.
I know. I'm like, well, and then she says the most awesome thing that will be on the reel later.
Just very proud. I'm happy to be part of this family, and no other place I'd rather be. And I think that we've been through a lot, and we've had some really happy times and like mountaintop times. We spent a lot of time together in some beautiful places, and but we've had some really tough times, and I think that's really molded us. We always talk, Wayne and I talk about being foxhole buddies. Well, I have a bunch of foxhole buddies. And I read something this morning about a mother always being there for their kids. And it is true. I would drop anything. If either one of these 3 people on here, or even you, Trent, needed anything, I would drop it and I would be there. And I think that's just all accumulation of our journey together. So
May, we're going to need to have you back for another podcast, I think, because I want to go deeper here, certainly with you, because everything you're sharing there, there's stories around that and how you show up, not just for these 3, but for all of us around you. Just even getting a text from you and I kind of conspiring for a non-family member that we both love tremendously, and how you've shown up for not just these, but those that are in those circles, is what you said earlier, Bryce, those periphery circles too. That's anybody that touches, you're part of that Wagners do big things. And as an extension, many of us have been blessed by you and how you show up. Wayne, wow. So I think it would be generally understood that you're a wealthy man, but they know part of that wealth here now, that relational wealth, is very, very real. I celebrate that. So as we come to a conclusion of our Team Wagner first podcast, we're not trying to get it all done in one, but the first of it's got to at least be annual now. Wayne, what's emerging for you as we talk about envisioning more and the fruit of the labor here?
Well, I think our time in Arizona was really healthy this year. It was we took time to kind of go through. We did go through the practical things, like how does the family net worth lay out today? What are the businesses? Who are some of the people that we need to be raising up and investing in and pouring into? Like a year from now, who are we going to need at Visionary Wealth Management? A year from now, who will we need at Liberty Entertainment? Which has the sunglass business and all the other businesses, thinking through those things and some, in some of those situations, we've got partners, we got to come back and say, hey, we were talking, let's, digest and let's bring that to them. In other ways, we have these, every business is kind of like a drop on a pond, and it's creating ripples. And so when we think about the various ripples and the various businesses, various spheres of influence, whether that's church, community, nonprofits we're affiliated with, so on and so forth, and really being the people who, hey, there's a sphere of influence. Hey, these two probably touch, or they should touch. And so much of that, there's so much long-term benefit from being a connector. From kind of in our brain, we've got these millions and millions of synapses that follow. They're little connections that create our memories and create our connections for us. And when we can do that in our social circles, there's so much benefit to be had for that. And yes, some of it is economic, but far more. Listen, we listened to Arthur Brooks in Arizona, and he talked about happiness. And happiness, he may as well have been preaching out of the book of Ecclesiastes, because happiness is tied to having something meaningful to do with people you respect, for people you love, and living a life of service to others who can't return the favor under the umbrella of the Almighty. Like the whole book, that boils down the entire book to very rudimentary, cheap terms, but it's having something to do with people you love, for people, or with people you care about, for people you love, and having a service aspect of that where you're giving, not getting. And he goes through all of the science and then he ties that to the Almighty. He happens to be a really devout Catholic, but he's a guy who, he is really passionate about that faith. But he says, listen, unless you put yourself in a context to realize that this whole world doesn't revolve around you, you'll never achieve anything of significance, and you will definitely never be happy. And so that, I found that to be really humbling, and really, I really connected, and that message really resonated with me when we were in Arizona. And today, envisioning more is about, what does this look like when we take this and start multiplying this and compounding this over years, perhaps someday, decades. And there's a stewardship. Meanwhile, May and I are on a bit of a health journey and spending a lot of time, effort, and money. Bryce just gave a thumbs down. We'll have to edit that one out. So
that's so fast.
It was like being at an auction. You kind of flinch a little bit, and you all of a sudden you bid. So.
I don't even know how.
Right. That was funny. Anyway, but I think that we're so excited to be on this journey together. Hopefully, creating coattails and coattails. People say coattails as though those are financial coattails. We want ideological, philosophical coattails. We want to call people to think bigger, dream bigger, envision more for their family relationships, more for what a career can, how a career can impact and echo long past the time that person's gone. And that this is a context for us to kind of capture a little bit of where we are today. And I'm just so grateful to have all of you with us. And Trent, thank you so much for moderating this. As always, you've done a great job and served us really well.
What a privilege to host Team Wagner. Team Booth loves you guys. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for listening to the Envision More podcast with Wayne Wagner Jr. of Visionary Wealth Management. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by the conversation today. If you want to dig deeper into the show notes or Wayne's work at Visionary, you can find us at envisionmore.com. That's Envision with a Z. Advisory services are provided through Wealth Plan Investment Management. Wealth Plan Investment Management and Visionary Wealth Management are separate entities. The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Thanks for listening.